team at OpenAI recently released their Apps SDK for building apps inside of ChatGPT, and I'm super excited to announce that we now have support for this inside of Zuplo's dynamic MCP servers. And I've built a little application. I'm going to show you how it works and then talk through how it all comes together in Zuplo. Let's take a look at it. In ChatGPT, I'm in developer mode, so I can add my own MCP servers to this. And I've added the application that I built. What it is a simple application that goes and gets a bunch of GitHub stats based on a specific username, and then it returns a visualization of that inside of an app in ChatGPT. So let's take a look. So if I ask, get me the stats for Zuplo, what it's going to go and do is call an MCP server, and that's going to return a bunch of data, but it's also going to return some templates that data is going to get injected into, and then it's going to load this up inside of an iframe in ChatGPT. So you can see this here. This is what it is. My wonderfully vibe-coded visualization template for this has grabbed all of the information and it's injected it in here. And this is what those applications actually look like. You can design these however you like. There's a lot of freedom in here. Basically, this is sitting inside of an iframe and it's just HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. So you've got a lot of control over what it is that you can do. You can also pass back information and have this update based on new information and new prompts and also interactivity that happens inside of the widget itself. So how did this all come together? I'm going to show you. We'll jump over to Zuplo and see how I built this. Over here in the Zuplo portal, I've got a fresh API gateway set up, and right now I've just got one API endpoint ready to go, and it's the /GitHub-stats endpoint, which is what's being used by the MCP server in my OpenAI application to go and get all of the information required from GitHub. Right now, none of that stuff is there. It's just an API endpoint. We can go ahead and test it out. We'll use my username, and it returns a bunch of JSON from the GitHub API that includes things like, the top repositories and various languages, and all the bits that you saw in the visualization get returned in here. And this is coming from a custom function that I have here just to go and call the GitHub API, do a little bit of transposition on the various different bits of data that we get back, and ultimately form a JSON response that we can pass over to OpenAI and ChatGPT. So that's what it does right now. Let's add all of the elements that we need in order to turn this into a widget that can be used. The first step that we need to undertake is going to be actually adding a widget resource. Now, all of these applications inside of ChatGPT, they're based off of an MCP server, and that's connected to a bunch of MCP resources, which can basically be anything. You can pass HTML, you can pass PDFs, you can pass anything you like along as a resource that can be consumed. Now, for this, we're using basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So what we can do is pass over a resource that is the entire file for the visualization that we have here. So all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's required for this, we need to be able to pass this over as a resource. So let's set up that particular resource. What we'll do is go to modules, and this is how you do this in Zuplo. Other ways that you'll do this will be a little bit different to this, but in order to actually take something and pass it into the request chain, you're going to need to set this up as a module. So let's do that, and we'll call it widget resource. Now, I'm not going to talk through every single aspect of what's in here, but just to show you what it actually is, all this is doing is defining a constant called GitHub stats widget HTML, which is effectively set to a huge, big 400 lines or so of HTML, various different bits of JavaScript, and CSS. That's all that's in here. And this was, like I say, I vibe coded this because I don't have the design skills to create nice visualizations, but certainly AI definitely does. Now, the only thing that's really important here is that this could basically be anything, right? You could just return a single H1 with a hello world in there if you wanted to. And then this here is what actually gets returned. What we're doing is effectively saying that this is a response that we're going to pass in when requested, and we're going to return all of that HTML, and we're going to apply these particular headers. And this is the one that's really important, this content type text /HTML plus Skybridge. This is what OpenAI requires the content type be for any of this stuff to work. So you have to ensure that that is being included when you return all your HTML as part of this resource. Otherwise, it's going to have a hard time dealing with it. So this is everything that we need for the visualization. We've got the right content type. So if we save this now, that's our resource for the widget set up. So now we're going to start to build out the MCP server that passes all of this back to ChatGPT. So if we go back to the root designer, we've got our main root in here, but now we need to add a root specifically for that widget resource. So we'll go in and we will say we want a new root. It can be a get root, and we will call it /MCP. Doesn't actually matter what you call this. This is just for identification purposes more than anything else. And, you know, it's arbitrary, really. So if you're going to have a lot of these in here, then you might want to come up with some way of ordering them, and that's totally fine. A summary for this is going to be the GitHub stats widget UI, and we'll give it a nice operation ID, GitHub stats widget resource, just so that it's a little bit more human readable and identifiable. And then what we need to do is set this up to point to that particular function. So we have it set here, widget resource, default export. So now when we call this particular endpoint, what we're going to get back is an object of all of that HTML with the content type of HTML plus Skybridge. So that's set up now to be able to deliver that whole widget over via the MCP server to OpenAI. Now, we need to set up the MCP server itself now that we have all of the elements in place. So our MCP server can live /MCP. We can leave all of this as the default. And we'll give it a name because we want to be able to identify this properly. So we'll call it GitHub stats version 0.01, definitely very early. The description you can include if you want to give us a little bit of information about what this MCP server actually does. You can go into as much detail as you like in here. You can include how to use specific tools, what the specific tools actually do, but you've also got tool descriptions that you'll see in a second that you can do that with as well. So let's add in these particular tools. So what we've got here now is the ability to select what actually gets put into our MCP server dynamically. So you can see right now that we have these two, one GitHub stats and one resource, but they're both listed as tools right now. And if these were just tools that were making API requests, that would be absolutely fine. But we've actually only got one tool here, which is this, and this is a resource. So one of the things that we've added in here in order to support this better is actually give you some control over some of the elements inside of the UI for defining this. So if we go back to the widget UI, once again, you can see here, we have this MCP tool set up right there. And we can go in and actually change what type of this is from tool, in this case, to resource. And we can give it a description in here if we want to. We can change the URI, and we can also set the MIME type. Now we know that this is going to be important down the line for what ChatGPT actually expects. So let's go in and make some changes. So we will give it a name of GitHub stats widget, description, visualization, yes, widget for GitHub. And then we need a URI. Now, this can also be anything as well, as long as it's identifiable and you can reference it. But typically they tend to start with resource // and we'll call it widget and GitHub stats. And our MIME type in this case is going to be text, HTML plus Skybridge. Okay, so that's now all set up. Let's save it. Go back to the tool selection for the MCP server. Now when we go to select tools, we can see that we've now got our main tool and our resource. So we're going to select both of those and add those in there. I'm going to quickly show you some of the elements that kind of underlie all of this UI that we've been working with right here, and just jump into the roots.oas.json, which is the OpenAPI specification for this particular API, and the MCP tools and the resources, just that you can see like what actually underlies all of this inside of Zuplo as the source of truth. So you can see here we've got our GitHub stats endpoint right here. It's set up as a post. It's an MCP tool. Then we've also got our resource defined right here, and we've got the additional elements that we added when we set it up as a resource, what it was called, what the resource URI actually is, and then the definition for our MCP server and the tools that we want to be contained within that. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I was testing this is that in order to get ChatGPT to behave properly with rendering the data that gets back from this particular set of MCP tools, you need to add a couple of additional elements that instruct it to like how it's supposed to actually work. And I'm just going to add these in here. And this comes directly from OpenAI. And effectively all this does is it defines what the output template is going to be when this gets called. Is this actually something that is accessible? What should the text be on the screen when it's making the request to the MCP server to get the data back? And what does it need to put in once it's actually finished doing that? There are a whole bunch of different things that you can add in here, but now that we've got the support for this underscore meta key right here, you can put any of the additional OpenAI elements that you want to use inside of here and have them be passed over as part of your tool calls. So we are ready to go. The gateway is building, it's deployed. So we've got ourselves an MCP server. Let's grab the URL for it, which we can do right here. And then we'll head over to ChatGPT and I'll show you how you implement this. If we go into settings and apps and connectors, you can see the one that I showed you at the beginning of the video, which is right here. What I'll do is disconnect this and we'll delete it and we'll add the one that we just created. Okay, we're in apps and connectors, click create. We're going to add GitHub stats, put in the server URL. There's no authentication in this case. I understand that. So I'm just going to go ahead and check on the server and get the information that we need. So let's click this and I'll show you what comes back. So it's been added, and what you see here is the action that we have. We've got the one tool for get GitHub stats, but you've also now got this additional metadata that we've brought along with it. So we know what our widget is actually called. We know what should be said when it's been invoked. We know what happens once that's been done. And it's accessible. Any changes that you make inside of Zuplo, once you redeploy them, you don't have to come and go through the process of re-adding all of this. You can just click on refresh and it will update with anything new that you change. So let's get out of this and we will start up a new chat. We need to add the MCP server that we just added so that we can start afresh. And then this time we'll say, get me GitHub stats for what's in this. So it's going to go ahead and invoke this, and I think it's going to ask for permission. Yeah, fetch the stats, goes ahead, grabs those statistics and loads our widget into the screen. So there you go. That is how OpenAI apps work inside of ChatGPT, and that's how you can, I think, very quickly get them set up and running inside of Zuplo as an addition to your existing API or as an addition to your existing MCP servers that you may already have there. There is a full example of what I've just showed you available to work with. You can deploy it directly to your own Zuplo account if you want to. Play with it, amend it, do whatever you need to, and it's also available on GitHub. You can find the full source code and the example at zuplo.com/examples.